Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. It's nice to be back in D.C. We just had a nice little pre-visit, or let's call it a visit. Went down to Florida. We went down there for a special reason. It was a program scheduled, but we scheduled our, I talked to my daughter before, and she looked up the mileage, and she said, well, if you go one way, it's, I don't know, something like 1,200 miles. If you go the other way, it's 800 or 900 miles, something like that. So I went the long way, and I went the long way on purpose, because technically I didn't want to speak to the people that I was scheduled to speak at. I wanted to go to one of the people down there, and I wanted to talk to them about something, which I did. Okay. These trips you learn a lot. Well, we talked a lot about what about HBCUs or something like that, historically black colleges and universities. We're definitely in a new stage, but the same pattern is developing. You know, the same pattern is developing, and we like it because we've seen it so many times that we don't even have to look to see it. You could feel it. You could. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of our experiences too. We didn't have if y'all remember, we had a flyer years ago. I mean, time flies for real. It was 2007. It was called How to Punk the FBI. We did another one in 2009 called Repunk the FBI. Now you got to realize 2007, is that 15 years ago? Something like that. Yeah, that's 2007, 2017 is 10 years, 18, 19, 20, 21. That's 24, 25 years ago. 15 years, 16 years ago. One of our messages, stop trying to copy the system. Stop trying to imitate the system in everything, even movement. The movement will determine you'll do something, then they'll do something, and then all of a sudden you'll find that you're imitating the system, or they'll be directing you. A perfect example is the FBI. We had a program called How to Punk the FBI. And I use that specifically for certain reasons. And they may not be apparent to everybody else, but the word punk, that it used to stand for us, it meant a sissy. Use sissy, use funnified. How to Punk the FBI related directly to J. Edgar Hoover. Now, everybody knows now from going to the movie that he was a cross-dresser. Yeah, he was a cross-dresser. He had the FBI beat up. I mean, just oppress what we call sissies at that time, homosexuals, anybody was different. But he and his best friend, they had lunch together all the time. They was both sissies. And I remember Imam Jamil said something about it one time. I don't know where he ran across the information, but he talked about old Bad Breath, I think of his name, he was a senator at that time, a Southern senator, a Dixiecrat. And then he mentioned an old sissified J. Edgar Hoover. How he ran across information in those days is beyond me. Of course, he was correct. But we've learned several lessons during this period. One is satire. That's what How to Punk the FBI was. It was satire. It was like, make fun of them, harass them. And our idea at that time was to insult the FBI. But while insulting them, we won't, we'll either go to jail, they'll bust us upside the head or some kind of way, or they'll leave us alone. Now, they don't leave you alone. You don't have to worry about that. We're not counting on they will leave us alone after I do that. They hadn't did it before. They hadn't did it. The only thing about the FBI was last year, I think one of the guys came by here, and he came by and visited you. He had a Korean guy with him. Did you see the Korean guy? Okay, right. So that was a pair. They always usually come in pairs. And he talked to me and he said, well, I don't think you should go out to Oakland and this might happen and that might happen. And he's using my word, just do good deeds here. Just stay here. I told him, y'all FBI, y'all call out there, that's the city police, that's Oakland police. You call out there and tell them to leave me alone and to give us all our stuff back. You the FBI. That's what I was telling him. That's very close to what I told him. Back to the satire. Now the satire, remember, a supreme strategy is to do things that's unexpected, do things that the system is not prepared for. Maybe they don't even have a defense against it, except that defense would cause them to go overboard. Like overboard would be just mowing me down and shooting me and dragging me down the street and everybody. That would be overreaction. That's not beyond them. That technically is normal. You talking to us? You got to remember the arrogance of the FBI. You got to remember just the arrogance of J. Edgar Hoover. He's a cross-dresser. His friend that he have dinner with or lunch with is also funny as he could be, right? And he runs the FBI. I think his first case might have been, what's our black guy? Marcus Garvey. Might have been Garvey. Definitely the Palmer raids. This is like real early, 1919 stuff. And they didn't become the FBI till up in the 20s. In the 30s, they was calling them G-men. He controlled every aspect of it. G-man, government man, He built the FBI into a superior so-called crime-fighting machine. All those skills that they use, fingerprint analysis, footprint analysis, I remember when they had the Lindbergh baby, Walling Salam. The Lindbergh baby, it was up in Jersey. We prayed already. And then the FBI was asking them, "Well, did you do this? Did you do that?" And they said, no. You know, they hadn't developed real investigative methods at that time. They did some investigation, but the FBI really brought it into the 20th century. So we are not dealing with somebody that's first of all, when he became the head of the FBI, he stayed there. If it was in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 50 years for one man to stay in the position. That's why after that, they didn't do that anymore. They didn't allow nobody to have a lifetime position. Number one, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover would have information on everybody. So if Johnson was a president, J. Edgar Hoover would ask for a few things, and he knew that J. Edgar Hoover had everything on everybody. Now, J. Edgar Hoover didn't like the Kennedys, but he liked Johnson, you know, and he might have liked Nixon a little bit. Now, these are flawed characters. All these are super flawed characters. But he had something on him, so he could, him and Johnson is no problem. One time he was visiting Nixon, and he presented it to Mr. Nixon. Mr. Nixon, my whole life is this. I haven't gotten married. I haven't did this. Because this is my life. In other words, he's asking him, I want this lifetime appointment. Stay a lifetime appointment. I want to. Okay. So he had a whole lifetime to hook up the FBI in his image. It was, I don't know how long before anybody black was in the FBI. That was a no-no. You could be a little snitch here and there, but you couldn't be a formal FBI agent. And when they did movies in Hollywood about FBI, he would review the script, and he had the ability to choose who was going to play. First of all, he had to be tall, strong, blondish, you know, white man to play FBI agent. And J. Edgar Hoover would review the script, or they couldn't have nobody in Hollywood. Now remember, let's not forget the 50s. In the 50s, we have the Red Scare, the communist. Yeah, they had the communist scare. In the 50s, they had all kind of hearings, and they had Hollywood scared to death. And a lot of careers were ruined just by people being on a little slight list, you know. And he was definitely a government snitch. Ronald Reagan. Yeah, old Ronnie. Ronnie was a tattletale. He was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And he would be all these other, they was worried about communism. Reds. In Hollywood then is kind of like it is now. Except for John Wayne and a few more, Hollywood was liberal. Because see, in Hollywood, you work with all kind of people. So if you was Irish or something, you had to work with an Italian in making movies. And in the modern times, look at Hollywood. Hollywood is the most mixed, blazo. It's very few technical racist in Hollywood. because they got to get along with all kind of people. Right? It's just normal. And that environment thrives on, first of all, most of the Hollywood actors were poor when they didn't start out rich, but they got big time. So they always had sympathies toward the people. You know, in other words, Hollywood, the people was everything to them, their fans, so to speak. So Hollywood then and now it's even more, that Hollywood is liberal. Some of the speeches we had, Susan Sarandon and others, you know,